All right. Well, welcome everybody. It is Monday, January 8th. Happy New Year to you. If we haven't seen you in the office, we're excited to have this new year and talk about a few things to help you guys move forward and reach your goals this year. Dr. Younglove is our founder of Heartland Weight Loss, and she's always working in the background and helping us, but she's created such a great program here, and we're excited that you guys are here and joining us today. And if you have specific questions, shout them out. I know she wants to talk about habits in the new year, but we'll talk about questions as well. So welcome everyone. Dr. Younglove, I'll let you get us started.
Do you want to go through the list of questions that were submitted first so we can kind of hit those, since those are specific to, I don't know if they're people here or just people that have reached out, but I always try to hit those first since they're specific.
Absolutely. So I had 3 questions submitted. The first one is protein. We talk about 80 grams of protein minimum, but we want you to get to 100, 120 grams or even more. So why do we want them to have so much? What if they're like, I just can't eat that much protein?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the story for eternity here. If you go back to the way we evolved as humans, we were meant to eat a lot of protein and a lot of fibrous-y vegetables. We were supposed to chew a lot to get these nutrients. And protein was the staple of our diet, and we've just gotten away from it. But getting back to it is really getting back to what we need to build cells. And so if you look at cell metabolism, if you look at physiology and metabolic processes and all of that, protein is this unique macronutrient that we need to make things. And without it, there's a lot of disruption. And we have just shied away from protein over the years for a lot of reasons, and become normalized to not having as much protein as we should. So it is really hard to turn that lever back up again for a lot of people. Protein is a nutrient that when you eat it, it makes you really full. I mean, it's lovely that it does that, but it does. And most of the time in our current food environment, we're not used to food making us that full. So it's really hard for a lot of people. But we know from 8 million studies on animals, on humans, on starvation, on overfeeding, those kinds of things, that a protein requirement is that real. And then the 80 that we talk about for women and the 120 we talk about for men is like the absolute bare minimum for health. It's not even for weight loss. If you look at the studies for weight loss, it's closer to a gram per pound of ideal body weight per day. So I mean, I am a short woman. I should probably have at least 120 grams of protein a day when I'm trying to lose weight. I think we've talked about this before with you too. Like when you crank up that protein lever, the body goes, oh gosh, I've got what I need. But the side effect of that is just a tank in hunger, which we actually are trying to capitalize upon. When you're not hungry all the time, it tends to turn off a lot of that food noise that we tend to feel a lot in the world. So it's multifaceted, but it's just the way it is. We've just gotten away from it, and it's so normal to get away from it that it's hard to turn it back again. I mean, it just is what it is. And the funny thing is, or the ironic thing is the older we get, the more protein we need, which seems counterintuitive. But when we're young, when we're children, when we're teenagers, when we're 25, our ability to take that ingested dietary protein and do what we need to do with it, we're awesome at it. I mean, we can use almost every last bit of it. As we age, we're much less efficient. So we have to eat more of it in order to capture the benefits of actually utilizing it. So most people think I'm going to eat less as I age, which is okay overall, but you should be eating more protein. That dietary pattern should absolutely shift completely the opposite direction that most people shift it as we age.
Now, there are some people that have kidney issues, and of course,
yes,
they're restricted.
If you're in renal failure, yes, when kidneys are not functioning, and renal failure has actually got to be pretty severe before they really restrict your protein. But usually when they restrict it back down to like that 80 grams. I mean, they very rarely, unless you're on the transplant list, which I've taken care of people on the transplant list, and I'll get a notification from their nephrology transplant person saying limit their protein to 75 grams a day or 60, there's very strict limits. But that's about it. I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, eating blueberries won't turn you blue. Eating cholesterol doesn't raise your cholesterol. Like, eating protein doesn't hurt your kidneys. But if your kidneys are in end stage failure, It's a different story.
And
So
there's a question also about metformin. Does metformin affect your kidneys?
Metformin, if you have compromised kidneys, can raise your level of lactic acid. So again, in our very elderly, in our renal compromised patients, yes. Now, people with acute sepsis, hopefully that's nobody sitting here. Those people are hospitalized because they are sick as dogs. Their kidneys aren't working either. And that's where we've had some studies with metformin and lactic acidosis, which is where the kidneys aren't clearing the lactic acid. So in acute sepsis, we stop metformin, absolutely. There are a lot of reports about if you're getting a bunch of IV contrast that the kidneys have to process, we hold metformin for a couple of days just because the kidneys are busy. It's kind of like if you're over drinking, you don't take Tylenol because the liver's busy managing the alcohol, kind of that same like give and take and protect the kidneys. But unless we're in acute renal failure, or chronic renal failure on the, hey, this is, you're being acutely managed by an intensive nephrologist, metformin's not doing anything to your kidneys. Extra protein's not doing anything to your kidneys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's hard. And people say, I just can't eat it. And you kind of have to sit back and say, what is that? Right. Because if it's a matter of bites, like I can eat 200 bites of potato chips, right? Like it's not a bite issue. It's not a chewing issue, right? We can chew gum all day long and chew that many times. It's not usually a calorie issue. And people say, I cannot eat 4 eggs. You gotta go, well, I mean, you can eat that many calories in a piece of pizza. So it's just a satiety. Like it's the hunger isn't there. And the other interesting piece with it is protein really has no hedonic signals that come with it, that pleasure with eating. And so when we have that hedonic on top of nourishment, and then we just get the nourishment and we don't get the hedonic, we just get done with that earlier mentally. It's hard to describe, but like, I mean, I could eat 4 eggs. I could probably eat 8 eggs at once if I really wanted to. I just don't ever. But, I mean, you can eat that many calories or that many bites or that many. It's just putting it together as a different sensation than eating that many calories or that many bites of jelly beans or, crackers.
And with that in mind, you really have to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner to get 30 or 40 grams of protein in at every meal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just can't eat
Or
that
you,
much at one
or
time
you
for
got to
most
be a
people.
machine about it. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And the other thing that's very interesting that's really just come out recently, I mean, we haven't even fully adapted to this, but that especially as we age, that protein needs to come in chunks, like to really get the benefit of muscle stabilization and not undergo muscle deterioration with age is, I'd have to look at the studies. Women need about 30 grams at once. So like getting 20 grams, the 20 grams, the 20 grams, the 20 grams, not nearly as beneficial as getting 30, 30, 30 or 40, 40, that really kind of chunking it up, but it takes work. It takes changing habits. I mean, you got to work at it.
Absolutely. Okay, we have another question. Someone says when they drink water, their right side hurts. They have a dull pain. Is that a concern?
Like right side abdomen or I don't know.
Where
I'd
is
say
your
that, I
pain
mean,
at?
drinking water shouldn't cause pain. So I would say that's not normal. That probably requires investigation. I mean, we're meant to drink a lot of water all the time, really, without even thinking about it.
Yep. And then it looked like someone was trying to start a question, but they stopped. So we'll see if
Well,
they
we can come
finish
back
their
to it.
question. Okay, so another question that I had was, so we can have fruit, which has, of course, fructose in it, right? But
Mhm.
what about the sugar in milks? Why can't we have a glass of milk?
I've thought about that and we've tossed around and then pulled it back again because the confusion aspect. So fruit is glucose plus fructose combined with a whole bunch of fiber. So the beauty of fruit is when you chew it, it takes a while to break down in the small intestine into the particles and move into the bloodstream, which is why I like it. Milk is glucose plus galactose or galactose, whatever. It's a different sugar, lactose. I remember what galactose is, but anyway, those are different sugars. Milk doesn't actually stimulate insulin a whole lot, but it does stimulate it faster. And so I suppose in people that really love milk, they could have milk instead of fruit after a meal. I mean, it's probably six, one half a dozen of another. What we've run across, including milk, is that people that put milk with each meal in place of water, which for health reasons, all right, fine. But for weight loss, it really does change things. And most people don't get the same satisfaction from that glass of milk as they would get from the fruit. And really, we don't need fruit. There's really no physiologic reason we need to eat fruit. We're kind of giving it to people because they need sweet. They want something a little bit more decadent. They want to finish the meal. So I would say in select cases, if you talked to Lisa and sat back and said, I want milk, like it's my thing. Okay, maybe have that instead of the fruit after a meal or two. But when you start, I mean, we just run into that, like people want to slide it in as just part of the day and then still have the fruit. And we start getting into a lot more weight neutral foods instead of the weight negative foods that we need to eat. And so from a health standpoint, I don't really care. It's just the way we kind of mentally organize it. And then obviously chocolate milk, disaster, strawberry milk, disaster. Like the minute you make milk something that it is not, it's not milk anymore. And we see a lot of that, or we see people trying to make ice cream out of milk. And all of a sudden it slides into this, like, I don't know, this thing that's a transition thing. So I mean, if milk's your thing, have a glass of milk instead of fruit. I don't care. Most people don't, though. Most people just want to have it and then have something else afterwards. So
Right.
it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So they used to say don't eat more than 4 eggs a week. What is your
I
thoughts on
know that was a bunch of nonsense. There's so much drama about eggs. Even if you look at like the American Heart Association, all of this took away like cholesterol. Eating cholesterol doesn't raise cholesterol. Like that was a great idea. It totally did not work out. Like, good Lord, it didn't work out. Now, saturated fat consumption and heart disease, okay. But if you really break it down into the studies of like what type of saturated fat, we're not talking about dairy saturated fat. We're talking about trans fats. We're talking about crazy, icky seed oil fats. Like, yeah, there's not much harm in dairy in terms of health.
Awesome.
So, yeah, we're just stuck in that. Good Lord. I mean, the cereal companies really want you to eat cereal instead of eggs. Like, and there's a lot of money there saying eat cereal instead of eggs. Like, it's going to be a long time before that story goes away. There's just too
Yep.
much money in the old story.
Yep. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of hands in the pockets in government
Oh, good Lord.
and big
Yes.
companies.
Yes.
So
And there just isn't a unified, like, egg makers of America that's fighting for eggs, but there's a
mhm.
lot of people fighting for cereal and toast and oatmeal. Good Lord, the oatmeal people and the amount they spend on lobbying. And I mean, there's a lot of money trying to keep us stuck in this eat this thing story
Mhm.
that didn't work out. I mean, when we got rid of eggs and started eating cereal instead, like diabetes went up, heart disease went up, deaths went up, obesity went up, like all of that went up. And the data is clear as could be, but the incentives to keep that story the same are so hard, so
Yep.
hard, so frustrating.
And in that same realm, I had a patient this morning who asked me about steel cut oats. He's like, my
Yeah,
heart doctor told me eat steel cut oats every single day, and you're telling me not to.
right. And 75 years ago, eating oats was better than eating Fruit Loops or whatever the hell, like it's better than that, but it's still not awesome. And that story was that was a very bought story, actually. And if you look at the stories, it's as part of a heart healthy diet, steel cut oats is good for you. Okay. And it is not terrible for you, right? It's not a weight loss food. And I guess that's where we also have to be very specific of if you are a healthy individual who has a normal body weight, who has normal metabolic flexibility, meaning you don't have any insulin resistance, which is incredibly rare to find in anyone with excess weight anymore. I mean, it's just part of having excess weight is insulin resistance. But, my 14-year-old, 15-year-old who has no excess weight, who's incredibly metabolically healthy, who has very little body fat, if he ate oatmeal, steel cut oats every day for breakfast, it'd probably be all right because he doesn't have damage done to that processing system. But trying to heal that system with one of the things that can worsen it is not a good idea. So I guess sometimes we have to sit back and say what's good for health. Like I think we're going to get to this one, but smoothies, okay, those are okay for maintaining good health. Or if you're trying to correct nutrient deficiencies, okay. But if you're trying to lose weight, it's a different process? Like, what are we trying to achieve? You know,
Yep,
like,
absolutely. I'm glad you
yeah.
addressed that.
Yeah. I mean, me sitting at home in front of the fireplace reading a book is probably really good for my mental health, but it's not really good for raising children. Like that's not, I have to go pick one up from school or whatnot. Like, what's good for one thing in life doesn't always serve the other things. And so trying to figure out what are we trying to achieve is always the goal.
Yep, absolutely. So another question, um, are there some vegetables that we should focus on more than others? There's the root vegetables or the higher starch vegetables, and then also like beans and things like that.
I mean, I would say whatever vegetables you like is probably the best thing to start with. The starchy vegetables, back to that, corn, peas that are in the ball form, so shelled peas, potatoes, they raise insulin pretty darn fast. So, like, even though we call them vegetables, they're really not in the same realm. Um, Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, carrots, peppers, I don't care, artichoke hearts, those don't raise insulin. So those are all in that like non-starchy vegetables, lettuce, I don't care. But we don't worry about them because the hormonal response is very different. Now, if you only like broccoli, you got to eat broccoli, I guess. I would say start trying to find other ones you like. But it's the getting the vegetables to the small bowel bacteria is the key. So if the only one you like is broccoli and you're going to feed your gut bacteria broccoli 4 times a day, okay. I think it sounds really boring to me, but so diversity is nice, but quantity is more important than diversity, I would say. And hopefully you can start with quantity and then diversify from there a little bit. But the starchy ones are really hormonally different. And so that's why we really turn those down. Again, not bad for you. I mean, if you look at cultures that were raised on a plant-based diet and they ate tons of beans and corn and they don't have metabolic disease, they're healthy as oxes, right? Because they don't have the disease to start with. But once you have the problem, then it's gasoline on a fire. And so we try to really avoid those things when we're trying to achieve something. So it's again that health versus weight loss. And beans are just, I mean, if we're soaking beans in water and steaming them and putting them into bean soup, okay. I mean, again, there's a little bit more starch in there than there would be in chicken and broccoli, but that's one thing. But when we start smashing them up and making refried beans, and then we're really eating a lot of things like that, it does change things. And when we're grinding them up and turning them into pasta, we've lost all the fiber, which if you go back to like what makes beans so beneficial, it's the intact fiber that the small bowel has to dissolve in order to get the nutrients. It's the package deal in nature really changes the effect of it all. I mean, if we were to sit and chew on a wheat stalk, the way just right out of the earth, okay, you're not going to actually see much hormonal response to that. But when you pound it into a powder and then you turn it into bread, it's a totally different food. And so when you take beans and mess them up, they're different foods.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
How about raw versus cooked vegetables?
Whatever you like. I like them cooked more. I don't
What
know.
about
That's me. I mean,
same here?
yeah, I mean, they're a little softer. You process them a little bit faster cooked, but it's fairly negligible. I mean, I never think much to dip them in things. I just usually cook vegetables and some olive oil and some salt, and they taste good, and I can make a whole tray. And I don't know, it tends to be just an efficiency thing on my end. But in the summer, I do more raw vegetables. But in the winter, it's just, I don't know, I like them cooked. But I think whatever. I think fresh ones taste better than frozen ones, but whatever, that's individual. I mean, I think it's preference there.
And what about canned vegetables?
If they're canned in water with some salt, just so they don't rot, all right. I mean, again, the texture to me gets weird, but that's me. I prefer fresh green beans much more so than canned green beans. But in a pinch, canned green beans are convenient and they're cheap. I mean,
Yep.
a dinner of a rotisserie chicken and a can of green beans and 3 apples will feed a family pretty well, really cheap. I
Yep.
mean, if that's what you need to do, it'll work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah,
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, those are my thoughts on veggies.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing and answering everybody's questions. Those are all the questions that I have today. So if you want
Okay. Does
to
anybody else
talk
have any
about,
more? Or do you want me to talk about habits a little bit, or do we get them all? Can't see the chat. Let's see if I can find the chat. There's my
you
chat.
click on the 3 dots on the right or the more.
Well, there we go. Okay, but we got them all. Okay.
Yep.
So the thing I want to talk about was habits, because this time of year it always comes up. And there's a great podcast I listened to again the other day that's Peter Attia and James Clear. For two of my very favorite people. They're a little esoteric and a little, Peter can be a little bit elitist and things like that, but they both talk very factually and very logically about topics that are sometimes really hard to talk about. And I used to talk to patients about this all the time, is that habits of how do we get new habits? And I've got a new journal this year, and I'm trying to get a new habit because I've always written in a journal in the morning. And this new journal that I got as a gift has a morning and an evening entry. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got to figure out how to start the evening entry. Like, I'm not an evening journaler. And so I've been kind of revisiting this. Okay, Younglove, you can make a new habit, right? We've studied this. And it's fascinating the things you have to do to make the habit change, and there's a whole long list of them. But I think the biggest thing that doesn't happen, that we need to have happen, that I was just telling somebody about the other day, is this idea that habits have to align with kind of our perception of who we are as an identity, right? If I see myself as a fit human, then it's easier for me to start exercising because it aligns with this idea that I am a fit human, right? Mm-hmm. If I have this identity that I am a health person, then eating vegetables at every meal is decently easy to slide into my daily routine because I already see that as part of who I am. Mm-hmm. And when we don't approach it that way and we're like, I'm going to eat vegetables because I'm trying to lose weight, but at the end of the day, my goal is to just get smaller so I can eat whatever I want. The identity that we're aiming for has nothing to do with the behavior at hand. And so it's really hard to get that momentum to go there. I'm trying to think of the description is that like, our routines are like gravity. Like, we can fight against them, but we fall back down and we fall back again. So we have to kind of change that trajectory. And so, okay, I can learn how to journal at night. I mean, I can figure that out. I am a journaler. So I just have to figure out how to do it. So it's a much easier habit for me to adopt because it does align with something I already do, right? I just have to figure out that little piece of it. So different story, and so I played with different things. And so this morning, I put the journal on my made bed so that when I unmake my bed, I actually have to pick up the journal and go, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to write on that tonight, and it doesn't make me go, oh, I have to write in my journal, because that wouldn't align with me as a journaler.
Right.
It's just that reminder of, oh yeah, you're supposed to change your routine a little bit because you said you were going to do this thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not a painful change. It's just oh gosh, I need a reminder of that. Yep. But at the end of the day, if I never aligned myself as someone who writes or puts their thoughts on a paper, or what I would say a journaler, then that habit's probably not going to stick because it has nothing to do with who I am. Especially if I view that as a negative thing that I'm being required to do, mm-hmm. that doesn't align with me, it's not going to stick. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing we have to turn, right, is who are we trying to become? If we're just trying to become smaller, but at the end of the day, we really don't care about what we want to be someday, it's probably not going to stick, right? If that identity is, I want to be somebody that my kids look up to as a health person and emulate, okay, that's a different identity than I just want to lose 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Or I want to be somebody that's small that gets to eat whatever she wants. Well, that's never going to happen, right? Like, I know of no one in the world that does.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. So like, that's an identity that's never going to happen. And I want to be independently wealthy and, live on a beach and own an island and, mm-hmm. have Jeeves bring me breakfast every morning. Like, it's not going to happen because it just doesn't live that way. So like that's a wish and a dream and a hope and but like, yeah, it's not really an identity that really aligns with the day-to-day behaviors.
Yep. That's kind of like, so I have a new habit, and I've been telling myself for 3 months that I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock and exercise. Yeah. And I've done it a few times, but at the beginning of the year, I said, I'm not hitting snooze when my alarm goes off.
Right. I'm not a snooze hitter, right? Like, it's that identity. Yes.
That's right. My feet hit the ground and I am up. And I made the decision and have chosen to do that. I've just determined that I'm not pushing snooze anymore.
I'm not, like, you have to have changed. Like, I'm not somebody that pushes snooze. And I used to be like, right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You have to align that identity. Like in medical school, I was somebody that had 2 alarms across the room because I would get up and hit it and go back to bed. And like, it was this whole system. And 3 kids later, I was like, man, I'm not somebody that can hit snooze. Like, my day's got to go, So like, I'm not a
That's
snooze
right.
hitter. And it's just changing that, like, it was okay. It aligned with my identity of I'm somebody that's tired all the time. So I hit snooze. Like, I actually fed that
Right.
identity. Right.
Exactly. Me too. And so now I'm
Yeah.
just like, no, I'm hitting
Yep.
the ground. And you feel better once you
Yep.
accomplish that task.
Yep. And then there's all the little tricks. And this is why I like James Clear, because he's like, make it easy, right? Like, put the alarm clock where you can't hit snooze, or that the alarm, the light flips on. And then the first thing you see, like, put your running shoes right in front of the toilet. So you sit down to pee and you're like, oh, I'll put the shoes on right now. Because once the shoes are on, I might as well just go. Like, it's
Love
finding
it.
all those tiny little
Hmm.
cues that make you just do it, right? Like, I get up and brush my teeth just out of pure habit. I do it every morning, but I can't even tell you it happens because I think about it. It just starts to happen, but it takes a while for habits to get there. So we actually have to prompt them, you know? I had patients
Yep.
that I said, just put your shoes on and drive to the gym and drive home again. Like, get in the habit to where, like, when you get home, you put your shoes on, you drive to the gym. And once that's a habit, then you're like, that, now get out of the car and go in. I don't care. And then come back out again. Like,
Yep.
form the habit as painlessly as possible
Yep.
until you're like, oh, hell, now I feel like an idiot that I drove all the way here and I haven't even done anything, So it's that, make it so easy and so simple. And,
Hmm.
you
Yep. And we
know,
have patients that, they struggle with making time to eat during the day because they're so busy
hmm
with work or whatever, or
hmm
they forget to drink any water. And
right.
so I'm like, set an alarm or,
Set an alarm, right? But until that, if your identity is that I am a busy human that doesn't have time to eat, you're not going to
right.
interrupt that as long
Very
as
true.
that is something you hang your hat on. I mean,
Right.
it's how do we describe ourselves to others? I'm so busy, I don't have time to exercise. Okay, well, the more you say that, the more you believe that, the more you're not going to find time to exercise.
What you tell
I mean,
yourself becomes true.
it does become true, right? And so it's one of those, when I started getting in shape, I don't know, 10 years ago, or old Tanner's 12 years ago again, it was like, I am an exerciser. Even if all I do is 2 push-ups every morning, like, I'm doing it, right? Like, because
Yep.
and it just becomes that routine of every morning I do. It's only 2 minutes, but I start off the day and it's already reinforced that, like, that's who I am. And I get to do more every day. And if I don't every day, that's not the end of the world. But like, as an exerciser, if I don't, I start to feel like a hypocrite, you know,
Right.
because it's the identity. But that identity is so powerful. I
It
think
truly
that's the
is.
piece that's missing. Yeah, it's that.
Yeah.
And why, right? I want to be an exerciser and a healthy human because I want to live a long time. I want my kids to live a long time. Like, I want to enjoy this life. It really has nothing to do with the size of my clothing. It has to do
Hmm.
with, like, what do I want?
Right. You want to be
So
able to travel or get
yeah,
around, do things on your own.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I want to be
absolutely.
90 and still doing stuff. Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's a big why. And so I think sometimes stepping back and getting our why and who
Hmm.
are we and what do we want to be? Because if we want to be somebody that's too busy to exercise, okay, that's fine. But
Then you're going
I'm
to
not
own
sure.
it.
Right. Then just don't put a whole lot of effort into trying to start exercising if it really doesn't align with your values.
Yep.
It's complicated. I think that Atomic Habits book is one of the best books I've read. I've read it over and over again, and I probably should read it at the beginning of every year because there's so much more in it every time I read it.
Yeah. You always catch something different when you read
Mm-hmm.
it again. Again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That
Mm-hmm.
repetition.
It's repetition, and it's, yeah, where you are in your life, you grab new stuff. You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know that the identity piece really struck me a whole lot the first time I read it, and then the second time I was like, oh my God, where did this come from? Right? There's just a
Yeah.
lot there. But that's what I see. I mean, I had a friend come over the other day who's 89, and he said, I got to lose some of this weight. And I said, okay. He's like, everybody in my family has obesity, with just genetic. I was like, okay. A friend of mine, I don't, and then we started talking about, okay, well, I mean, you got to eat some protein and we got to stop doing this. And he's like, well, nobody in my family eats that way. And I said, okay, right. But I mean, but this story was like, everybody in the family has obesity and we all eat this way, but it must be genetic. And I was like, yeah, that's that story. You gotta fix that, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
that story is keeping you right here.
Exactly. We can tell ourselves things over and over and it becomes
Yeah.
true. And we
Yeah.
believe it more and
And we
more.
believe it. I mean, God, we all do it, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
So I don't know. I think it's really important. I wish we could dive more into that somehow.
Hmm. It is interesting. Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm. I
And I
think
love
it's
that you
nutty.
said that the just do it for 2 minutes, the exercise thing, because I tell
I mean,
people
yeah,
that all the time.
now
If
you
you
are.
just
I mean, Yeah.
Middle of the day at work, if you could do 2 minutes
Right.
of
Do 2 push-ups.
exercise.
I don't care, right? Like,
Exactly.
do 2 wall push-ups as you walk to the bathroom every time. Like, all of a sudden you start going, well, I have to do that. That's who I am, right? It's the
Exactly.
difference between so this is an example they used in the podcast, and I love this example, but it's if you walk up to 2 different people, right? You and somebody else, and you say, hey, do you want a cigarette? And you go, no, I don't smoke, right? And the other person goes, no, I'm trying to quit. 2 different mindsets,
Right.
right? I'm not a smoker. Done. Like, am I worried about that person smoking tomorrow or a week from now or a month from now? No, like the identity is like, oh no, I'm not a smoker. But this person saying, well, I'm trying to quit means I am a smoker that's using willpower to not be a smoker right now. Like that's different mindset. It's a whole different set of words. It's a whole different set of thought processes, right?
Yeah.
When I say I don't eat fast food, like I don't eat fast food.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't eat fast food.
I don't eat processed food, right?
Right. Right. And I mean, it's not an absolute. I love to eat donuts, but I'm a snob about my donuts. And I only eat these certain donuts on certain occasions. And there's like these little pathways that make it harder for me to do that. I don't eat grocery store donuts. I don't eat gas station donuts. I don't eat prepackaged. Like I can start checking them off of like, I can't say I eat perfectly every minute of every day, but my limitations in there of like, I am a snob when I eat something that's not healthy for me. I'm going to be snobby about it. Okay. That's my identity. Keeps me from having donuts in the airport when it's 2 a.m. and
When you haven't been eating them for a while, when you do have them, your stomach hurts and you feel like
yeah,
crap.
get diarrhea every time. Still fun, but I just, I'm not somebody that does that regularly, and it's just trying to find those identity things.
Yep. Yep. Saying
I
I'm
think
not that person anymore.
Yeah, I'm not that person. Yeah,
I love it.
I know. It's just finding that. That's the missing piece, I think, for so many of us, and it's just such a rabbit hole mentally and in to go down, but I think it's worth it.
Absolutely. The things we tell ourselves becomes true. And so we have to tell ourselves a different story. Yeah. And a different belief in ourselves and believing that we can do it.
Right. I mean, I can say all day long, I'm not good at learning languages, which that's been my story. Since I was, like I'm a smart person, but I'm not good at learning languages. I'm probably never going to learn one with that story. Now, I don't really have a whole lot of drive to learn another language right now, but should I sit back and say I went to learn another language, like I'm going to have to fix that story.
Right. Absolutely.
Thankfully for translation apps, I don't really have to, but like that was a limiting belief of mine. And like, oh my God, am I going to make it through undergrad because I'm not good at learning languages and I've got to get this GPA? And like, it was a very big story in my head for a long time. And it probably is completely not a true story.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that goes with habits and things is looking back at what did you accomplish last year, I think, especially at the beginning of the year, because we forget where we started last year and how far we've come this year. And I think it's important to look back and see what you've accomplished. And then what did I do
emotionally,
well?
but just objectively, like, where am I? Did I turn that way or this way? Yeah.
Right. And what did I do well? Or what did I struggle with? What do I need to work on? Or what do I want to work on this year?
Yeah. Yeah. And break it down into smaller pieces. Yeah. There was something I was listening to yesterday that was talking about a diabetes protocol, but it was like a high blood glucose is not a problem. It's a puzzle to be figured out, right? The more we can just objectify things and look at it very analytically and go, why did that happen? Interesting. All right, let's solve the problem. It's a puzzle, right? It's not
it doesn't mean it's
moral or
always going to be
ethical.
that. There's something causing it. And if we can figure out what it is,
we just have to dive in and figure it out. Why did I do that? That's interesting. I mean, I think that's the scientific way of looking at things, but it's a beautiful way of looking at things, and it's objective, but it should be objective, right? Yeah. I wonder why I did that. How could I have not done that next time?
Absolutely. We have to recognize what's going on, what the problem is, and then figure out what's causing it.
Yeah.
What are the different levers, as you call them all the time?
Yes, the levers. What lever can I pull, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if I have an issue with eating dark chocolate chips, then how did they get in the house in the first place? Because I got to fix that, right? Like, trying to fix my love of those things, not going to happen. Like it's hard for me to sit back and say I don't like those. I can't change that story.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Someone
gave me, did I come across it?
Yeah. Someone gave me milk chocolate covered peanuts. And I thought I can have a handful of these and be fine. No, I had to get them out of my house because I am not good with that.
Yeah, no, I'm not. No, so to me, like, I'm not a milk chocolate eater. I'm a dark chocolate eater. So like that could sit in my house. But if you sit back and say, no, get it out, right?
Yep. I had to say, forget it.
Yep.
I am not good when that stuff is around.
Yep. but figuring that stuff out, I mean, I think that's that self-reflection that's really important. I think that's the fun part of the beginning of the year is like reflect back.
Yeah.
What problems got in the way? What are some ideas? Like check them off. And if it didn't work, try a different solution. But the solution shouldn't be I'm going to beat myself up for not being strong enough. And then we hear a lot
No,
of that. It's just crazy. Like none of us have iron willpower.
no, absolutely not. And then
And
there's
and
how foods affect us chemically, if we do have some.
exactly. Yeah. And then it's what could you do to help somebody else along this journey, right? Keeping the
Mhm.
environment. I mean, the environment, when you're surrounded by smokers, if your best friend is surrounded by smokers and they're trying to quit, how successful do you think they're going to be? Can you make an environment for them where there's less smokers, right? How do you manipulate the environment to make that a possibility for other people around you?
That's right. Yep. We have less
Peer
than a
pressure
minute
is
here,
real.
so we have less than a minute. So
Oh, yep. Okay. Is there
I want
anybody
to
else
make
on
sure
questions?
I don't see any other
New
questions.
messages. Okay, good.
But hopefully this has been helpful for everyone. We love having you here. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all the great questions. And if you have more questions, send them in. We'd be more than happy to help you through the portal. And then, of course, we'll have another one of these next month. So definitely jump in. Thanks,
Okay. Thanks,
everyone.
Lisa.
Yep. Thank you,
Bye,
Dr.
everyone.
Younglove. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.